firstly said good evening. Probably I'll talk a little bit about my history, and I'm still creating history, and we're still creating history daily. But I obviously was born and bred in Europa, and spent the first 16 years at schooling, including Newry High. Probably wasn't the most studious person, and definitely didn't get lots of marks, but I did get through intermediate, so that was a pretty good start in those days. I really wanted to work in the bank, but the bank manager didn't think I was quite suitable. So I used to work a lot at my brother, who had a hairdresser shop and also a butcher across the road, to earn obviously money when we were 15, 16. And this one particular day, the accountant of Hargie and Company, who was a customer, I used to sweep up the hair and take the money, which was fairly important, and sell cigarettes, because that was a fairly big part of business in those days. But he said to my brother, "What's your young brother doing next year when he leaves school?" And obviously nothing was planned, so he said, "Well, we're going to have a position coming up, and you better come in and have an interview." So I had an interview with Mr. Ed Hargie, who at that time would have been probably close to 70, probably a bit younger than that anyway, but he, I took my report card and I was hoping he didn't look at it, and he didn't. So I suppose his basis of employing people has been the way that I employ people, and that was really having a good chat and finding out a bit about the person, which is what he did. Anyway, I got the job and that was started on the 2nd of February 1967, and I went through a number of various departments. Started in the clerical side, I went out to the service department for 2 years, and then got into sales, the clerical side of sales, which is all the financial, doing finance, etc. But from there I got into selling, and I sold 3 new HG Kingswoods in 71, and that was my start of selling. And I then did the clerical side and selling for a number of years, and then became used car sales manager in, I can't even remember the dates, were late 70s, and then in 81 the sales manager left and I was then promoted to that position. So I had a very good grounding. I had a couple of very good people who trained me, and then in 1983 Malcolm Hargie, who was the owner of Hargie's at the time, purchased at auction, which I'll show you some details on that later, the property which we're currently on, and in Murray Street in Gore, with the intentions of himself setting up a dealership. General Motors at that time had a worldwide policy that the neighbouring dealer couldn't set up it on his own right, so he couldn't have 2 dealerships, and he didn't know that, so he had to get a partner, and the only way Holden would put a partner in was it had to be a buyout. So there's me at 33, 4 young children, quite a big debt on a house, and I had the opportunity, and fortunately we were able to come up with the amount of deposit that or the share that had to be coming together for the business. This wasn't the property, just the business, and I was able to get in on a 25% share. But what that did was every 2 years I had to buy out another percentage, and for then over the 10 years. So it was really head down, bum up to make sure it worked, and there was a lot of hard work put in by myself and my staff, and my wife in the background with the family. But that was really the starting of me, and I do have a saying which from opportunity comes success, and I definitely had a great opportunity back in 1984. The history of Holden in Gawler, and there's probably a number of you people who may know a little bit about the history or know about or around long enough back before, but Holden has had a checkered history, but it was, as a lot of the towns, had two Holden dealers, and Kernos or Aero Motors had been around for before the 48 Holden was released, but they were Holden dealers from 48 to 71, and then they changed to Chrysler. Now, Kernos were on the corner of Murray Street and Lyndoch Road. The building's still there today, which is now a fitness centre. Directly across the road was a showroom, and the used car yard was on the corner of Lyndoch Road and High Street. But they changed to Chrysler, and then sometime along the line they closed out after that. And there's actually a bit of info on the historical side on Aero Motors. But the other dealership was Court & Ware and Starling, which I can't find a lot of history, except I know when they sold, because they sold to John Duran, and he, which is in 1971 also. But Court & Ware and Starling were at 44 Murray Street, which is now where the Gawler Fishing and Outdoor Centre is. So that was the actual showroom. Service department was out the back, and then when John Duran took over, he set his service department up on the corner of High Street and Carlton Road, which was part of the Phoenix Foundry right on the corner, which is all obviously changed now. So they obviously, Court & Ware and Starling, there were three partners. They sold in 71. John Duran ran Holden from 71 to 80, and then he moved to Queensland. And from that time until from 1980 to 84, there was no Holden dealer in Gawler, which, you know, from where Holden were in those days, was quite a surprising thing that there was no dealer in town. At that same time, there was Ford, there was Toyota, Mazda, VW, Selways, VW, and Chrysler, which was Kernos, and again I'm not sure when they actually finished with Chrysler. So there was definitely an opening for Holden, and we, from Hardy's, we used to have a salesman come to Gawler regularly to call on people, because we had a lot of customers from Gawler going to the Barossa. So there was definitely an opportunity there, and so consequently, that's where we started. The dealership, and I'll now move on to the building a little bit, because not a bit, but the history of the building again, which a lot of you would know. Originally, this is obviously on the corner of Bridge and Murray Street, was the Fotheringham's Brewery, and there was still the cellars underneath and the tunnels going out to the road, which the original brewery was. Don't think there's very much else left as being original. And Time Fashions, which again there's a lot of history on that, employed a lot of ladies in the town, and Colin Teal, a local man, started in the early 50s. And then of course, unfortunately, with clothing coming in from overseas, that type of industry faded away in Australia. Gawler Datsun, and Jared's got a couple of photos up there of Timer. They are the original titles of the property from the 50s through until we ended up buying it. But the Gawler Datsun set the property up in 1976 and ran till 82. There were 3 different dealers in that time. Unfortunately, these were Adelaide people, and no disrespect to Adelaide dealers in that time, but they didn't create quite the right reputation in Gawler, and each of them went broke in their own way. So in '83 the property was actually being sold as a fire sale as such. There is the auction date as such, and said Hargey's actually purchased the property. I was fortunate then in '91 to be able to buy the property off of Hargey's. So I was, what's that, 7 years, yeah, 7 years in, I think. So I was very fortunate to be able to buy that property. Obviously it was, they were the days of 15s and 16% interest, so it was again a little bit of a burden, but I made sure that we did what we had to do to get it paid off as quickly as we could. In 2002, we expanded the property and I had bought it beforehand, but developed the property which was Bow Repairs. And again, it was quite an ugly site in Gawler, and that's obviously changed around. I think Jared's throwing up a few photos, which I sort of missed a little bit there, but we actually started up on the 3rd of January '84, and it was the reintroduction of Holden in Gawler, and this was the Steinhage era, and a number of you people would be saying, well, that's how I remember it. But the Hargey name we brought into the name to give some solidarity, because there'd been a number of dealers wafting through Gawler, and it just was probably just the way we started off. I mean, I operated the business from the word go. My partner was very good because he stayed right out of it. His money was in there working, and it worked very well for him to be a silent partner and get his share accordingly. We started with a staff of 6 on the opening day. We sold 5 cars on the first day, which was the 3rd of January '84. Our first customer was Mr. and Mrs. Jack Tobias, Gawler people, who bought a new Commodore VH, and Mr. and Mrs. Ian Ellery bought our first used car, a used Commodore, on the same day. So they were, I don't forget those names, and I've still got their original contracts. These are our staff up here, and already we had another person join the team from up there besides myself. So from the third man from the left on the right is Grant Stevens. He joined me from Hargey's as a young mechanic, and this year, at the end of the year, will be 40 years that he's been with us. So he's definitely one of our senior technicians in more than one way, but he's a very capable man. Moving on from there with the first, and just talking staff very briefly, that's the opening of the place. Just before we opened, there's the Bow Repairs, if you remember, before the traffic lights were in. It was a pretty ugly corner in comparison to what it is now, which is very open and so forth. Soon after we opened, we put on a young car washer, part-time, and he ended up being our first apprentice, and he's actually here tonight, Chris Rusby. So he started as a young man and was with us for many years. I can't remember the exact. Chris, you might be able to tell me. 25 years in total. Right, didn't realise that the time went so quickly, but yes. So that's a little bit later. Some of the photos of some of the staff. Just bear with me for a minute. Besides New Holden and service, my focus was really on used cars, and a lot of people might ask the reasons for that, but it was really the size of the location was very hard if you just wanted to put 7 or 8 or 10 new cars, and that was about what we were selling a month roughly, just to have them on display, and a few used cars. So we really concentrated on used cars for, firstly, what the place looks like, but secondly, it was a fairly important part of the business because we were selling about 3 used cars to every new car. So it was a part of the business that was very profitable, and I did need to be profitable because I had a partner I had to buy out. So it was a fairly important part of the business. Service department, of course, with the growth of car sales, was growing with that. And I had a particular theme, and you know, we only kept our best trade-ins. I wholesaled a lot of used cars that weren't up to my standard, and we still do that today. And my philosophy was not to sell a customer only once, but to get repeat and referral business. And that's again how our business has grown and grown. And today, again, the amount of people that have bought and their family have bought 10 times is quite amazing. Well, it's not amazing, it's just it shows that people will come back if you look after them. From the early days, I purchased used cars from various sources, and Holden executive and lease cars were a good alternative to a new car because there was a big savings on a low kilometre car, and not everyone can afford a new car. And that was my first Scoot purchase, and at that time it was a fairly big thing. I bought 4 VH Commodores, and that was the start of what we were built the business on. This became the focus in our marketing into the northern suburbs in Adelaide. We're selling the late model used cars. A lot of those people would then not buy used, but they'd come in and buy a new car. And of course, besides the northern suburbs, it was the Gawler area and north of Gawler. Our theme that we used was just 40 minutes from Adelaide. And again, 40 years ago, Gawler seemed a long way from Adelaide. We all know it's grown a lot closer, well, Adelaide's grown a lot closer to Gawler. But we changed that theme probably in the start of the Steinborn era, which we changed. It was well worth the trip. And we are known now Australia-wide as it's the place to buy. It's well worth the trip. Over the years, we built on the Scoot purchasing into bigger numbers, and buying over 30 in one sale from Holden was quite a common thing, that we would come back with a number of truckloads of cars, get them back, get them out into the market. These are some of the ads that we were running, which was the Scoot purchase of cars, very priced, very right, and we had a very good turnover of motor vehicles. I travelled interstate regularly, particularly Melbourne, purchasing the ex-Holden cars. Adelaide used to have a sale once a month in the early days. It then worked out to once a fortnight, but Melbourne had always bigger numbers because that's where a lot of the executives were. From 2002 to 2015, we were actually the #1 purchaser in Australia of ex-Holden cars. So it's, for something out of Gawler, it was a fairly good recognition. This particular slide shows a 86 VL Commodore, and to the other side is I'm going to say it was about an 84 model Porsche, which a gentleman in Gawler wanted us to trade it on a Holden, and we did the business. It was still our most expensive car I've ever traded, $98,000. And we had pre-sold it to a dealer in Perth. So I had the ability to have it for a couple of days and was very careful driving it. I did take it home and take Jared for a drive. I'm sorry I didn't introduce earlier, but Jared, my son, and Rebecca, my daughter, over here. That got put on a truck and went off to Perth. But as I said, it was our most expensive car that we'd dealt with, and still today I haven't had a car in that era. When I get down to the staff, and I mentioned earlier employing Chris, over the staff we've employed many people that I've been proud of on the career paths that they've taken since they've been trained in our operation, and we've always had a focus to employ and train younger people. We've also employed older people, but it's really been trying to train younger people. There actually is the photo of Chris graduating, I think, from after he'd served his apprenticeship. So it's myself on the left, Chris on the right, and Michael Schutz, who retired a couple of years ago, and he'd been with us for 35 or 36 years at the time. So that was our first of them. But really the business wouldn't be as successful as it's been without the staff that I've employed over the years. We've had some good ones, we've had some bad ones, but the good have outweighed the bad ones by a big way, and it's really been the part of our business that has made the place very successful. At our peak in Gawler a few years back, we were employing over 60 people. Currently, our total operation, which I'll talk a bit more about that shortly, we employ 95 people in our operations with Gawler, Barossa and Clare. Might just go for a moment to the a bit of a timeline, which I jotted down just so it gives a little bit of idea of the history of Steinbuller Motors. 84, I talked about that. 92, we took over the lease from Peter Page, who actually had a used car yard across the road at 29 in the main street. That was just after we took it over as there. And that was really to sell a slightly lower priced used car. That has now been developed into a small car centre where we sell small cars and small SUVs, which of course SUVs are a very big part of the market today. In 94, I completed the buyout from Hargis, and that was the start of Steinbuller Holden, as in the naming of, the renaming. In March 97, we probably did something that no other Holden dealer had done around Australia. We started leasing the property from the Ford dealer in Gawler, and that was we leased half of his yard on 106 to 108 Adelaide Road, which was Gateway Ford at the time, and we were then a little bit later, 2002, we actually purchased the property from them, and at the time we didn't continue with Ford. Holden, of course, at the time were very strong in the marketplace. In February 99, we purchased 88 Adelaide Road, which is that was Gateway, and 88 Adelaide Road is obviously the small yard on the corner, which was a caravan yard for many years, and Bob Phillips operated, and then it was operated as a used car yard, and I bought that property from the man who owned it. And we kept a lower price type of car in there. We had already upgraded the yard at 29, and of course we had the 102 yard. But that yard now just deals in larger SUVs and four-wheel drive wagons. The yard at 102, which again was a yard which would have seen were slightly lower priced car, and in relation to new cars, that is now our commercial centre in Gawler. In March 2001, I am a little bit out of whack in the times, we leased the Lindop Road Yard, which was the Kerno used car yard for many years, for cheaper used cars, and I'm talking cheaper as in $8,000 or probably $4,000 to $8,000 to $10,000 motor cars. And we ran that yard up until about 2.5 years ago, and really just came to a time that we couldn't get these were trade-ins, and the quality to be able to sell cheaper cars and the economics of doing it just ran out, that we couldn't continue to do that. So, and the lease was running out, so we made the decision to pull out the lease, and as you would see now, there's a development happening on that corner. I might just move back to promotion before I go on with a little bit more of the timeline. Promotion within the dealership, particularly advertising. We did a lot of advertising, smaller first in the advertising, and then we were very prominent on Friday mornings, which always got Saturday being a very good day because we'd get people who'd seen the ad would come in on it. And we were promoting the home of hand-picked Holdens, because we did hand-pick them, of what we particularly wanted. For many years we used KG on 5AA, and he's been a very good promoter of our business, and he still does that to a certain extent, particularly Saturday mornings. We ran a number of events over the years to promote the business. We had special events, and with the aim of raising a certain amount of money for charity, besides selling cars, but we're giving a certain amount to charity. That particular one was for multiple sclerosis, and then we also were a very big supporter of cystic fibrosis. In the early 90s, we sponsored the Gawler Horse Festival for a couple of years, which I don't think that didn't continue on. I'm sure we've got something on that. But, Holden's had I think it's called a blimp, which they had going around Australia, and for a short time that promotion was flying with that particular promotion on it. But I did go up in that. It was quite an amazing thing to go around and over Gawler with it. Customer satisfaction has always been our main focus, because if we haven't got satisfied and happy customers, we don't have a business. And we were recognised by Holden to be in amongst their top dealers in what they call the Grand Masters. You had to get a certain amount of cars and customer satisfaction. And in 2003 we became one of Holden's chairman's men. There were only 5 in Australia from different groups, and we were one of them, and we did that another twice within our time. There's a couple of photos which I probably should just relate to what they are. This particular customer is Rob Chamberlain, a local businessman. He there was taking delivery of a 03 Monaro, and I'm not sure if there is the photo of him taking delivery of his 85 model Commodore, and this was our 1000th customer. He's still a customer with one of the last Holdens, Australian Holdens that were built. I traded that car from him. I kept that car, particularly being our 1000th car, but it was a very rare car too. It was a Calais V8 manual with a factory sunroof, which is a very rare car today, and there weren't many sold even new in that time. I'll just go back to timeline a little bit.
Hang on, why don't pass on?
I'm sorry. Oh yes, a fairly good identity there, as in the Lithgow Flash, and obviously was our I've lost it. Governor. I was going to say Premier, no. Governor Marjorie Jackson, and she, of course, in 2000 was one of the representatives of on the Olympic Committee, and Holden sponsored the Olympic Games in 2000 with a special edition car, and she drove one while she was in Sydney, and wanted to buy one, and it was well worth the trip to come to Gawler, and she bought one. So, and she was keeping that car. I know she still had the car while she was governor. Whether she still got the car or not, I don't know. But it was a good occasion and a good identity of one of the many people that have bought vehicles from us. I'm not sure what you're flashing up next on. That's just one of the features that were run in the Motor Trade Association with us growing with Gawler, and there's no doubt in the last 40 years Gawler has had a lot of growth, and that was we were part of that. That's, I think, the feature of when we became one of the chairman's men with Holden, and as you all know, Holden was a very big identity in Australia. That's the opening, well, just before we opened the yard, which was Bow Repairs in 2002. Moving along, in 2010 we bought a property in the Barossa, which in 2011 we bought the Holden business from Hargey's at Tanunda, who their son, who had taken over from Malcolm, no longer wanted to be in the car industry, and we bought the business off, and we didn't buy the property, but we relocated that to Nurulta. Then in 2015 we purchased Hyundai and Mitsubishi, which in the Barossa in Europe, but they were on another site. And in 2000 and I think it's 17 and 2019 we built Hyundai first and Mitsubishi alongside of it. So they are the three sites that we're operating, or are operating there currently. 2015 was a fairly big time, because we already knew that Holden were going to be shutting the factory at Elizabeth, so the place that we, our sales were going to get smaller, so that's why we then made an expansion. I had my son Jared and my son-in-law Rebecca's husband David, who'd both been working with me for many years, who have now become partners in the business. At that time we've expanded, where we bought Hyundai and Ford in Clare, and we've now redeveloped that property. That's not the current photo. We've now got Mitsubishi there also, and have gone very strong into used cars up in that area. But the 2017, 2019, in the end of 2023, which is getting closer, we're about to open Mazda in the Barossa, and we're in the process of a rebuild on the current Holden site. Probably all aware, I have been a very passionate Holden person for my 56 years that I've been in the car business, and as much as we've got a involvement with the other brands, Holden, who of course is no longer with us. February 2020 we said farewell to the end of the Holden name and the brand being taken out of Australia by General Motors. Pretty sad time for someone who's very one-eyed, has been very one-eyed Holden, but that's some of the farewell photos, and I think there's most of the people in this room have had a Holden sometime in their life, or if they haven't owned one, they've been in one, or their families had one, and it's part of our history, and particularly with us here in the Gawler and the northern suburbs being so close to the heart of the line and the factory. I've been able to preserve some of that history at the Barossa. I've got a number of collections, a number of sheds, which are a collection of some older Holdens, but also some Holdens that are maturing, and a lot of memorabilia that I've got over the 50 odd years in the Holden side. Today in Gawler, we are a certified Holden service centre, and this will be part of our operation for still quite some time as in service. Because there are a lot of Holden owners, and we are kept very busy still looking after our Holden owners. But today we really market our operation with our strengths that we have, and our strength has been quality used cars and commercials, based on our motto, which has always been service, value, selection. And at Gawler, we're actually the leading used car dealer in Adelaide, in South Australia. So, there's a lot of yards in town, but we are still leading the sales with the amount of cars that we're selling. The internet is a big part of our business. We would probably be selling approximately 2 cars a week interstate. And that's usually based because we've got the selection, and our prices are right. And if we don't price right, we don't get the inquiry. So Jared spends a lot of time on making sure that we're competitive in the marketplace, and we're able to bring people from all around Australia, but particularly all around South Australia. So we're back in the early 80s, people were leaving Gawler to go to Adelaide because Gawler wasn't a competitive place. It's really turned around where we're getting people, and we have done right from the word go to get people into to Gawler. So the future is there. You don't forget Holden. Steinborn name is there for the future. I've got a son and son-in-law driving the business, and I've got grandsons coming along. Whatever that will happen, who knows. I'm still involved, particularly in the buying side, in the used cars, which I still have a big involvement in doing that. This is all online though these days. There's no longer physical auctions to go to. So I still enjoy what I'm doing, and I still do a bit of driving. Going to Clare tomorrow for a drive. So I suppose the couple of things in finishing off. Over the nearly 40 years, up to 2020, in Gawler alone we sold 10,480 new Holdens and 40,000 used cars as a roundup. As a group, as at 2023, we've sold 14,896 new cars, obviously including other brands, and 45,730 used cars. So there's been a lot of customers come through our place, and I'm pretty happy that we're getting a lot of those people keep coming back. In a total operation, in total turnover, we've sold 81,236 cars, keeping in mind the difference between what I just gave you are cars that weren't up to standard, that got sold off to other dealers for one reason or another. So there's been a fair amount of vehicles driving in and out the driveways from our dealerships over the years. But the thing that is always the comforting part is that I believe for our customers it's been well worth the trip, and I'm sure it's going to continue into the future. So thank you. If you've got any questions, please ask. Sorry.
You've still got one line symbol sign on the corner.
Yes, we have.
How are you able to retain that one?
It's amazing what you can do. No. Firstly, the big pole sign, Holden allowed us to use this until they make the final decision to, General Motors I should say, until they finally maybe expand the Holden certified service side, which may happen in due course. And if you look closely at the sign, it does say certified service under the big Holden line. The big line on the wall, I thought they would take it down. It belongs to us, but they left it up. When they we had to take the Holden signage off the building, as everyone else has had to. Because they're all based in Melbourne, I don't think they realise that our commercial site's got the full signage, but I'm not telling them, and I'll just leave and go that way. We'll keep flying the flag as long as we can. Yeah.
What's your main selling brand now?
As in new?
Yeah.
They're all very similar. Hyundai, Mitsubishi, Ford, and probably it's very hard to be distinguishing about which one.
So you're not a specific dealer of a specific brand?
We are, of those three, and talking in our group,
yeah.
We sell Ford, Hyundai, Mitsubishi at Clare, Hyundai and Mitsubishi in Barossa. But if you say what's our main selling one of those cars, it's all very similar numbers. Maybe Hyundai slightly, but all of these makers have had a supply issue since COVID, where there's been a component problem, and they're gradually getting back. But we've got orders sitting for 6 to 12 months, and particularly now with Ford, with the new Ranger and Everest, they're 12 months plus await for the cars. So until we start getting some supply back, we'll probably then start seeing a few more numbers. But it's very, very similar, the numbers that we're delivering.
Thanks very much, Michael, for coming today. I'm Gary from the Eagles Boundary, Bed and Breakfast and Accommodation. I took a few notes. after Paul said, could I give the vote of thanks? And it's a great, interesting story that you put together tonight, from humble beginnings in a hairdressing shop, all the way through to becoming one of the biggest suppliers of cars in Gawler and the Barossa Valley, employing 95 people. That's a great achievement, so that's really good. I do remember Bow Repairs when it was on the corner there, and Berg used to get the tyres, but I'm glad you've taken over that corner now, because it wasn't the most, the nicest looking place in the world, was it? But the other thing that I think that you've done over the years is you repeat business with customer satisfaction. And I think that's a big thing that you do. You know, you've got to, and especially in today's world, in my business as well, with repeat business, customer satisfaction, you can't afford to be have negative comments on the internet and things like that. You know, you've really got to be on your game, and I think you obviously have done that. You know, I'll just put some other notes down here. The brewery, Time of Fashions, that's all gone by the wayside these days. Maybe we can get you to become a sponsor of the Gawler History Team later down the track. You know, we're always looking for sponsors, aren't we? Cool.
There's a story behind that, but I'll tell you later.
One thing that you did mention was opportunity. With opportunity comes success. But I think in your case, preparation, meeting opportunity has made you very successful. And on behalf of the Gawler History Team, I'd like to thank you very much for coming and to accept this gift on the Gawler History Team's behalf.
It used to be called a guest speaker basket, but they run out of baskets, so it's now a guest speaker cardboard box.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Michael. All the best.
I'm sure you'll